doing?
Aretha's doing alright.
Just alright. Singing is sacred, and you shouldn't do it just because somebody wants you to. What's most important is that you are treated with dignity and respect.
You're special, Ree. You have a talent they call genius.
You better think about what you're trying to do to me.
How old is she?
She's 10, but her voice is going on 30, honey.
Let my go, let yourself be free.
How many albums have you had?
4.
And no hits.
I need you to focus and avoid frivolous distractions.
Honey, find the songs that move you. Until you do that, you ain't going nowhere.
I need a change. I want to sing what I want to sing.
Okay. Find out what it means to me. You really like it?
We love it.
Riri.
It's really good.
R-E-S-P-E-C-T. Find out what it means to me.
I got a single by this new chick named Aretha Franklin. To present Aretha Franklin Day.
You're not about to mess this up for me.
Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Aretha Franklin.
Looking out
This song goes
on
out
the morning.
to anyone who's ever felt mistreated.
I used to feel sure
You need to take a break.
I know how to run my business.
Have you lost your mind?
Maybe I found it.
I believe I have the chills.
Do you see what she is? She's a miracle.
Anyway, my name is Gil Robinson. I am president of the African American Film Critics Association. And today we are talking with the creatives who are responsible for the amazing film Respect. We're going to kick things off by first asking you, Liesl, about signing on to this project. And what was your impetus to do it? What were some of your concerns about doing it? What was your initial vision when you decided you would do it, and how that sort of changed along the way?
Sure, thank you so much, Gail. It's wonderful to be here. The studio, MGM, and Scott Bernstein, the creative producer, reached out to me, I think in the fall of 2018, and asked for a meeting. And at that time I was shooting an episode of The Walking Dead in Atlanta. And I had been really taking that time to think about, after doing theater for so many years and doing television, what my first film should be, what I wanted. As a director, the film is your calling card. You have, it's your vision in a way that television, can't quite be. And so I was really, deep thinking about what my kind of dream project was when I got this call. And, I have been an Aretha Franklin fan since I was a small child. I always say that, I first heard her music in the womb, because I don't know when I didn't know and love her music. So, I had a lot of time to think about what the things were that I wanted to see on screen, and definitely something to do with music, something obviously that really, showed Black people in all of their glory, because I still think in film, where we are at a deficit when it comes to that. So when it was supposed to just be a general, but I went in there in that meeting and I kind of just busted out a complete vision for the film. I said it should begin in the church, it should end in the church. I said I wanted to do a slice of life, not a birth to death biopic, because I feel like sometimes things can get very general when you do a birth to death biopic. I said that I wanted to use music in a different way, because often in biopics, you know, you just get a taste of the music. I wanted to let the songs play. I wanted to use lyrics as scenes, you know, and I kind of poured all of that into the pitch. And I also wanted something that was going to be glamorous and beautiful, because I grew up watching, you know, incredible movies with my grandmothers, you know, that had these fabulous, glamorous stars, and they were all white. You know, we never watched big Hollywood films with ourselves in it. And so I knew that the story of Aretha Franklin could sustain a kind of technicolor, magical, you know, dream of a film. And they came back and they said, yes, they wanted to build the film around that vision. And, you know, that's the movie that I pitched. And I think that's the movie that we made. And I, you know, Ina and I had worked together in television on Queen Sugar and for a Dolly Parton project on Netflix. And we just, you know, I just felt like she really got the sophistication that I wanted to bring. There are, you know, Black, you know, upper class lives on the screen that we rarely see in a period movie. And I just knew she would nail it. And Clint Ramos, of course, is a collaborator that I've been working with for over 15 years in the theater. So bringing Ina and Clint on to me was, in a way, an extension of, you know, I just knew that there would be a shorthand, and I knew that there would be a precision in execution, and the taste, as they say in Project Runway, you couldn't question the taste level.
You know, it's such a rarity to see a project, a big budget Hollywood film, helmed by people of color in just about every, you know, major department. That was clearly something that was important to you. And it was something, was it something that was challenging to make happen?
Yes, it was important to me, and yes, it was challenging to make happen, Gil. I mean, you know, here's the thing that I found I had to kind of talk about, which is that hiring, the lists of names that I started getting were, you know, were the usual suspects: brilliant, talented white men who have been doing films for, you know, for decades. You know, the people who I would say are, you know, in the inner circle of film. And of course, I definitely had to fight for some of my people who had never done a film at this budget point, or had been doing television for a long time, or had been doing theater for a long time. You know, and there are all of these, what I consider all of these rules that, you know, executives and people in control have that basically keep us out, right? So a rule like, well, she's been doing television for this long, so can she do a film? Or she's been doing film for this long, can she do a television? Or, you know, he's only done contemporary, this, can he do period? You know, so there are all of these hoops that you have to jump through, regardless of what the body of work and the level of creativity prove. And so what I kind of found I constantly had to do, which is a lot of emotional labor, because you're making people who are in positions of power uncomfortable, is to say, I think this is part of the, you know, this is part of the problem. This thinking is part of what keeps us out. Because when you look at the list that makes somebody qualified in your eyes, it's always going to just be white men. And my thing I kind of came back to is it's this question of who's qualified is not the right question. The question of who's been given access is the actual thing.
So Ina and Clint, what was the first thought that in your mind when you got the call that that Liesl wanted you involved in, of all stories, the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin?
I was thrilled, you know, one, because it was Liesl, who I grew very attached to over just 2 projects, and how we bonded immediately. And I was like, how wonderful to have this opportunity to do this great film with someone who I would love to work with, and a period project, and be kind of make it beautiful and upscale and really show these lives in a light that hasn't been shown. And it's great to have collaborators that we all agree to go in the same direction. And it was just it was so fun and great. And, I just keep wanting to do these projects, that really show Black culture in another light. It was great to finally be able to, and thank you, Liesl, to do a film like this at this scale, and to have the wonderful theater collaborators, which is my background with Clint as well. We all had such a really wonderful time creating this world.
And Clint, what about you?
Yeah, no, I would echo what Liesl and Ina have just said. I think, when Liesl, I knew that Liesl was working on the Aretha project, but I knew that it's in a big studio, and so when she asked if I would do it, I of course, I've always enjoyed working with Liesl in the theater. I think she's a type of captain who has a solid vision, and in a way that kind of makes your job easier, because there is a point of view already. It's not about you showing them, what they may not want. I think it's always, there is a definite point of view. But as Liesl said, there had been, it was always tempered with like, well, I don't know if the studio will allow me to do it, right? Like, or will give me access to do it. So, but as Ina said, it was just great to be surrounded by people of color, actually, and we had. I had in my department almost all women of color and queer people working on it, and so that was a treat, and a rarity sometimes. Yeah.
The three of you talk about the research involved. Of course, we all know the cover story, but in taking a deeper dive into Mrs. Franklin's life and career. What was that like? I mean, was the family open, friends? Were you given, Clint, for example, access to the closets that we've all heard about? She was legendary at Saks Fifth Avenue from quite a prolific shopper. So talk about that process of creating the magic that you did.
I'll just quickly say that, the family was incredible to us during this time. I think, they met myself, they met Tracy Scott Wilson, the writer, and I think there was a sense that there were these two very opinionated Black women, who were creating the vision and the world. And after our conversations, they gave us quite a lot of agency, I must say. And I think it was because they trusted us. I think they, which was very overwhelming because, as you know from the film, there are definitely parts that, Tracy and I felt like to understand her, we had to put in there. And, were difficult parts to watch, but at the same time, there was no doubt of our love and profound, belief in who she was and what she gave us. So they really kind of let us do our thing. And that allowed us to kind of go on our own journey of research and conversation in a way, not, without this expectation or this guidance. And it was quite freeing, I would say. Right, guys?
I think just like what Liesl's saying is that we didn't really have this, I didn't have the same kind of necessarily access, but I had Liesl to ask questions to help me research further and gave me some clues of where to go, in addition to going to Detroit and checking out the house and, really finding out the style and class. And I was actually had my own surprises about how they lived. So really, really taking all those clues, and, it was a lot of conversation as well, because you want to make sure that what you're looking at is correct. Like, is this photo right? Is this really what happened? Is this how it really looked?
And some of the locations were just so iconic. So capturing that, recreating that mood, that sensibility must have been fun.
It was fun, and it's always a challenge. You want to get it right, so it's always a little nerve-wracking, but it was a lot of support, and everyone was very generous.
Now, Clint, you in particular, we're talking about someone who personifies the word diva, someone I have a friend who got on a plane from London, and when he landed in LA, the funeral was still on. We're talking about someone who had a dress change at their own funeral. How do you even begin to dig into that?
I think I think you just, you fill yourself up with everything that you can, I suppose. I started with reading a lot, listening to the music, reading as much as I could about her, the biographies that were authorized and unauthorized, and then reading about the peripheral characters around her life, like her father, Clara Ward, and there are many biographies out there, and they're excellent actually, and particularly around her father. Sort of like creating that world, and then you just kind of like find every extant photograph there is of Aretha, and that's what I did, and a lot of them, she wasn't very photographed prior to the Columba years, but there were a lot after, right? And then you have to conjure up color because most of them are in black and white. And then at a certain point, you just kind of have to park all of that, right? You've kind of filled everything up. And for me, I just had to park it, and then go back into the story, go back into looking at Jennifer and interpreting it within the parameters of the research, and the world in particular. I think, yes, there are plenty of photographs out on the internet, but like, I think one of the things that we have to understand is the way these photographs of African Americans particularly during those 3 decades, they're curated, right? And they're curated by people who don't necessarily look like Black people. And so I think part of my research was to go to churches, because each Black church has an archive, their photo albums, right? And you will actually see a lot of the photographs that are not on the internet, right? And sort of like find the nuances of dressing, the sort of very independent styles that Black folk have throughout the decades. And so it was really about that and looking at the research in a different way, looking at it from looking at what had been sort of ignored, I suppose, and then kind of like putting all of those clues together.
So it's more about capturing her essence and the essence of the era, various eras that she was active in, and then sort of creating outfits that met with that.
Yeah, I mean, because there are some iconic looks, and to a certain extent, we had to sort of really stay close to that with minor adjustments in color and in shape, to accommodate Jennifer's figure. But a lot of it was really going back to the story and, what would tell, what kind of color palette, for instance, would actually, propel the story further.
In general, let's talk about the 3 of you, making that transition from theater into motion picture, because the mediums are similar, but they're also very different. What has that journey been like, Liesl?
It's actually been very seamless. It kind of reminds me, when I was out of grad school for maybe 2 or 3 years, and I went to grad school for acting. I was an actor for a long time before I became a director, and I was becoming an actor who complained a lot about how I didn't have good directors, and I decided I better put my money where my mouth is, as opposed to stand on the sidelines and criticize. And it was a very organic and sort of seamless transition. I had always had a director's brain. I had always, done text analysis for beyond my character. I'd always thought about, blocking early on. So it was a very easy transition. I feel it was similar in from theater into film. There was a point when a lighting designer actually said to me, he said, "There's more live feed and video in this play than there is anything else. Are you over? I mean, why are you still doing plays?" And I realized that I had started to do a lot more multimedia And I was really excited by the camera on stage. And, I needed the extra challenge, I think, after, 15 years of directing on stage, of composition in a different way. So I was just kept on adding challenges to myself, just kept on adding elements. And I realized he was right. It was time for me to move into, just into like a immersive camera experience. And that's when I transitioned into television. And it was actually quite, like I said, it was so fun. It was so organic. And, the things that I love to do, which is work with actors, really craft very methodically performance with actors, became even more fun because you just, the camera was able to be so intimate in a way, and you just a whole new level of conversation with actors around nuance of performance. So I absolutely love that, and I found that certainly in television, actors were so hungry for it because sometimes that conversation can get lost because of the technical aspects. So that felt great, and then just the collaboration with all of the heads of department remained the same as my collaboration with my designers. So it was wonderful, and it just sort of it had momentum, and I never had to question whether it was the right decision. Thank God.
What about you?
I was a set designer for a while in the beginning of my career, but I always had this thing about realistic environments, and I could feel that I was drawn much more to that. And I always wanted to know the reverse, so when you look at a play, you're looking only at one point of view-ish, and I always wanted to know what's on the other side. So I was already like, I want a three-dimensional environment. I want to create the whole world, and the floor and the ceiling and what's outside the window. And so it was interesting when I went from, I kind of hounded a theater film director at school, and he was making a movie, and I hounded him until he hired me. I was just like, you have to hire me. I really, really want to do this. And so it was that quick, I completely felt at home right away. And but I embraced my theater roots. There's always those tricks and things that I still do to this day that, I love my training in theater. I think it's the best especially for being creative, because you have a whole open mindset of your environment. How do you capture characters, because that's really what it's all about. How do you make these characters come alive in their environments? So, I found it an easy transition, and I just always love being able to collaborate with other people that come from theater. It just is an easy conversation too. We have the same language to begin with. So anyway, that it was, I found it pretty easy.
And Clint?
Yeah, I mean, it was, I think for me, they've said it all. I think it was, I think the way we're trained in the theater is to sort of really, because we are allowed that time to look at a narrative and be incisive about it, right? Because it is in a way it is contained, and we're able to really go in there and turn it inside out. I think that sort of was something that I brought to my process with respect. But I think, for me, it was about scale. I mean, a dress is a dress is a dress, right? But then if you have to multiply that by hundreds, then I think that was exciting for me to be able to do that. And yes, as Ina said, being able to really, through design, look under the hood, at people, reveal certain things that, because of the camera being that close, you're actually able to provide more narrative detail to what the character is going through. And I think also for me, it was about the work ethic. I think the way I came up in the theater was, I was able to, I looked at everything sort of globally, and knew how a decision from one department would actually affect the other, and so I think that was one of the things that that was important to me, so I loved being on set a lot because I actually needed to know how those things moved, and what I was doing was actually affecting the shot, so it was a lot of fun.
The recreation of like Muscle Shoals, for example, right? So both Clint and Ina were relentless in terms of the research of Muscle Shoals, how those buildings looked from the cigarette stains on the walls to the clothing, and because it was so precise in a way, it allowed me total freedom of, it was actually like the way I sort of set it up was like we were rehearsing a play, right? Because we had this contained space, and, there was a passage of time, and we were just, there was the cast had done all the research, and they walked in and they just said, they felt like they were really there in that place. And what was also kind of amazing about that day was that some of the original musicians who were actually there on that day of recording with Aretha Franklin came to set to watch, and they walked through the set, and they sort of looked at each other, their younger versions of themselves, Spooner Oldham, and they were so blown away by the precision. It was actually quite emotional to see them kind of point at a crease in the wall or point at a pair of pants, and it was such a privilege. There are moments like that where you just realize that we are a permanent part of her legacy now, and that the care, I'm going to get emotional talking about this, the care that we took to tell her story and all of the people's stories around her really mattered. It's not just another film. It's part of these real people's legacy, and for them to be so proud really felt like we were, no matter what happened going forward, that was a complete full moment.
Yeah, I was going to say it must be intimidating and overwhelming to have to recreate, these environments that have been visible for so much time. And I guess Ina, in doing that, just sort of walk us through how do you, how you make that magic happen.
It's
we've
like
seen so many photos of her at Muscle Shoals.
Yeah, it is the relentless research, but almost like what Clint is saying is like you have to kind of digest it and release it in a way. But I am like an insane detective of trying to do that, and it's very overwhelming and frightening. And so the only way to do it is to break it into little tiny pieces. And so I just handle things in little bits at a time. Like, okay, I'll start with the ground plan, and then, and that way you're building your environment one little step at a time. So there was one detail that's so specific to Muscle Shoals was the soundproofing on the walls. And we wanted to get it exactly right. So we made a mold and made it exactly. There's something really wonderful about having your own creative expression, but you want to get it right, And
what do you do when the materials are no longer available? Like, when you think about the gravestones in Detroit and the old world quality that the city has, but a lot of that doesn't exist now. So how do you figure that out?
You just keep looking at images and you copy, and we make it. We make everything from scratch, and which is a really wonderful process too. There's something about that really gets you really part of their world to understand how they built the space. And so that's kind of, how did they create the soundproofing? What makes it important for these musicians to exist in this world? And so that's kind of, how it begins and how it develops. And the recording studios in particular were so fascinating to me. you know, how they would take these kind of odd spaces and then turn them into this world that gives them this sound, you know. So even though I'm not necessarily a musician, you suddenly become the musician because you're like, okay, what kind of board is it? Or what, you know, how everything moves and everything fits, and how do people move in the space? And every single piece is important. You know, we might have had a seamless collaboration, Clint and I, because he just kind of captured that essence as well. And so for some reason, the environments worked perfectly for all of us. It was just such a, you know, but it's completely frightening. I'm not going to say all the years I've been doing it, it doesn't matter. It's always like, oh God, I don't know. How do you begin?
Yeah, and Clint, I mean, clothes were of such quality during that time, and there was so much style, it seemed, that people had that unfortunately you don't necessarily see today. I mean, was there ever a concern about, I would imagine sometimes you'll see someone in something and they just don't know how to carry it in the way in which, you know, it was designed.
I mean, yeah, that's always a concern, I suppose, you know. I think part of one of the gratifying things was also being on set and actually being able to arrange the background with Liesl and everybody, because I think, you know, you look at all like hundreds of people and you can sort of sift through who's carrying the costume and who's not, you know, and then you put them in the fore, and, you know, it's all of that. It's like this careful arrangement, which actually film gives you sort of plenty of allowances to do, you know. And then, you know, thankfully we had a lead actor who carried clothes beautifully, you know, and a lot of that was, you know, me trying to really form a very early relationship with her, and see, you know, what these period clothes would do on her body. So a lot of the first few fittings were not really about anything about, you know, what we were going to put her in, but rather, you know, like trying to get sort of this body temperature and our sort of like temperature with each other, you know, and certain things, and create a language, you know. And so, you know, it was a lot of work, but it was, you know, it was so satisfying when you looked at the monitor and it was, you know, this kind of assembled thing that, as Ina said, like you've been fearing, you know, because like fear is a great motivator every single day, because you're like, how many thousands of dollars am I going to waste today? You know, and so and then when you see that thing like in the Rainbow Room or those churches, and you see the monitor and you see it kind of like fall into place, it's transcendent, you know, that feeling.
When Marlon Wayans came to meet me, you know, when he really advocated for himself for this film, and he flew out to Atlanta and came to my office for a chat. And, you know, we were just talking, and I took him, you know, for a little tour around, because Ina had put all of these incredibly beautiful, you know, all the swatches, all of the color combination, all, you know, everything was up on the walls in the hallway, so that we, you know, we were just surrounded by, and my, you know, my 75-page lookbook was printed and up, and, you know, Clint's research images, and so there, you know, there was just like this, it was already a museum, you know. And he walked through it, and he came up to me, and we just met that day, and he came and he said, I don't know how to express how much I want to be a part of this. He's like, you're not making a movie, you're making a masterpiece. And I can tell from the extent of this research, and what you guys have already put up there in terms of texture and color and the specificity of every single set room, you know, the period of her life in terms of Clint's research. And, you know, it was all up there so that we all just stayed inspired. And I was really, you know, we were just doing our work. We were deep in prep, and we all knew that we had a vision that we were getting to. But to hear, you know, somebody come in and look at it all for the first time and synthesize it that way was just, you know, really, moving to me, and that's not why I give him part. He got the part because I knew he could, he would kill it. But it was, it was a great moment. And then, seeing it on the big screen all come together after color correcting, and there's still times when I'll see a clip played, or I'll be on a panel and they'll show a clip, and I think, wow, that looks really good. Did I do that? Did we do that? Because it's just, it's profound. It's profound. You only get so many circles around the sun to make art. And I am very, very grateful, that this project was one of the ones I got to do.
Ina?
I was just really listening to Liesl, and it's true. I've watched it so many times, and I agree. I'm going, wow, it's such a rare opportunity and project to be able to do something like this, and to pull it off so well, without thinking about the process and the nuts and bolts of it all. You just look at it, and I'm just so I'm really like her. Every time I see a clip, I'm like, oh, wow, that's so great. I really enjoyed that. It's like, I want to do more. But, it's a rare thing, and I'm really proud of this project. And I'm happy for the recognition that it's getting too, because it was really important to do this film. And like she said, a slice of the life, not the whole life. We're just portraying just this really early part of her life. And that was really an important kind of statement to do. So anyway,
Well, it's when she became the Queen of Soul.
Right.
Exactly. I do want to say, Clint and I have talked about this. Actually, we've all talked about this. People can be very kind of cynical about biopics, as if there's just, there's so many biopics. But the truth is, there are not so many biopics about Black women.
Mm.
So when I see writers be cavalier or dismissive of the genre without taking the time, and this is white supremacy at play, when they don't understand their own blindside biases, that we have only ever seen on the big screen, Tina Turner's biopic. So this is just not some other one of the millions of biopics. No, it's not, because you don't let us do our biopics, but now we are. And usually in the past, it would have been a white man directing and a white man writing. And we didn't do that with this one. So I every time I look at the screen and I think, we made history. We are still, this is not just any old thing, any old genre piece. This is still something that is, is fresh and inspiring to audiences, because they still don't see a lot of it. And that's, I think, why we poured so much of ourselves into this project, because we understood that we were making history the way that Aretha Franklin made history.
Yeah, my final question is going to speak to that. I mean, having, at the end of the day, finishing up the project, how did you understand, each of you understand Aretha differently, at the end of this movie? And we'll start with you, Clint.
Oh, wow. God, that is that's a loaded and profound question, Gil. I think I understood her exactly what I thought she was. She was a beacon in an American life. And I think part of what I am most grateful about was that we told this American story, right? And the way that we rendered the film was, at least for me personally, being an immigrant, it was an homage to a people who taught me what the real America really is. And it allowed me to show these people in their glory, right? Because more often than not, when we see Black folk on film, it's always about a particular kind of struggle with a particular kind of struggled aesthetic. And so I'm mostly profoundly very, very grateful to have been given the opportunity to show that, right? Because I always go back to what Toni Morrison says, right? The root, the culture of America is through Black folk. It is not a regional culture, it is America itself, right? And Aretha was a beacon in that culture, and yeah, that's how I understood it.
I didn't actually realize her struggle and her strength. And I always admired, as I was growing up as a child, looking for strong women and how did they get to be creative people? You know, how do you keep going? And that was what I so admired in her, is that no matter what, there was something that was driving her. And I just learned a lot. I really understood her struggle and her passion and how nothing was going to stop her. And to be so confident in her talent, you know, that takes a lot to know that you are that good and I'm going to be confident. And I don't care that I'm a Black woman. I know where I came from and this is where my family came from. And I'm going to show all of you that I am great. And I think that for us, you know, that come from that background, you're always beaten down. You're always told you can't do it, or who thinks you can do that? Who told you you could do that? And so you need these people who are like our heroes to show us that you can. Don't let anything get in your way. Just stay in your world and in your head, and get all the noise. It's like she pushed all the noise away, and she just had this laser focus. You know, my mother is a first generation Italian, and my father is an African American, Native American person. And all those struggles, you know, like they all struggled so much just to accomplish something in their lives as artists. So that's, you know, deep in me as well. It never goes away. Kind of like Clint was saying, it's just always there in you. The struggle is always there, and it's always nice to see someone with this light and vision and drive and passion. So that was all there, you know.
Which is, you know, you remind me that she was probably one of the first Black stars who was active in the social justice movement. You know, in the way she put herself out there, you know, for the civil rights movement. So that had to take a person who was grounded in a certain type of way, you know, to leave the comfort and security of being a star and leave themselves open to that type of exposure. Yeah. But Liesl, we're going to leave the final thoughts to you as to what your final takeaway on Miss Franklin was after finishing this amazing movie.
Well, you know, your question about what we learned about her, got from her, is a wonderful question, because, you know, everybody thinks they know these people because we've been listening to them sing, we've listened to them breathe and appear, and the thing that I learned about her that was so inspiring as a gift, as a storyteller and a filmmaker and as a Black woman, was, you know, that she was so profoundly shy as a young person and so vulnerable as a young person, and that allowed me to open up the storytelling of this Black woman in a way that to me is really important, because film and television tells us that Black women are sassy, they are powerful, they are strong, they are leaders. But what about the parts of us that are unsure and shy and scared and vulnerable? We are not monoliths. We are not one way, even if that one way white audiences find entertaining, and even Black audiences find reassuring, because, you know, we want to feel strong. And learning that about her is what helped me understand what my kind of mandate for this film was to show this woman in every dimension of her humanity. And to show us as audiences that we should be expecting all of that and more from our characters, and that we tell you who we are, you don't tell us who we are. And she loved Black people so much. She gave so much to our culture. She advocated for us until her dying breath, and her pride in who we are infused the way that we all made this film, the way we lit, every single human on that screen, dressed them, placed them. Her love for us was what we infused into the film.
Well, it certainly shows. Thank you again. That's why it made our top 10 of the year, But Lisa, Enya, and Clint, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate your talents, and we're certainly looking forward to seeing what comes next from each of you. On behalf of the world's largest group of Black film critics, you guys have a great day.